Welcome back. Thank you for joining me for 8.6 day 2. We are continuing to factor trinomials when that a value is not 1. However, now we're going to progress where there can be some negative values in here. Now to begin, let's just recall what we were doing in the previous notes. So we're going to start with that review, factoring 8x squared plus 35x plus 12. And so if you remember, what we're going to do is break up both that first value and the last value. So there are all my options. Now, recall after I break it up, that first section has two possibilities. So I'm going to create two possible skeletons for what this could look like. It could end up looking like that, or it could look like this. So after I get that structure set up, I'm going to choose one of them. I'm just going to choose the top one to begin with. So I'm going to start with 8x plus a number, x plus a number. Now remember those green lines I was making yesterday. Now I'm going to start plopping in these values. So I'm going to plop in the 1 and the 12. And after I do that, I'm going to make those green connections to try to get that middle 35. Now, 8 times 12 is kind of a large number. You may want your calculator for that. That's going to give you 96 and 1. And if you notice, that is well above that 35 we're trying to find. So let's reverse the 12 and the 1 and see what happens then. So I'm going to put the 12 here, the 1 there, and let's see what connections we get now. So when I connect these up, I get 8. Connect these up, I get 12. That only adds to 20. So 1 and 12 are not what I'm looking for. So let's try our next set of numbers. 2 and 6. Connect those up to get 42. Connect those up to get 2. 44 is not what we're looking for. So let's reverse it. Reverse the 2 and the 6. So I'm going to put the 6 here and the 2 there. That's going to give me 16. That's going to give me 6. 24 is still not what we're looking for. So 2 and 6 are not the options. I'm going to try 3 and 4. So connect these up. That's going to give me 32. Connect those up. That's going to give me 3. And that is what adds to that 35 that we were looking for. So in this instance, this is that factored case. So we're going to continue that conversation, continuing doing our examples just like that. But now we're going to have some negative values in there. All right, so that's going to be the difference when we're putting in numbers today. So our first case, when B is negative, but C is still positive. Now we're going to start these problems exactly the same way. So I'm going to break this up, and I'm going to break that up. Now, in this case, it's actually really nice because if you notice, each one only has one option. So we know for a fact that the skeleton we're going to be making is going to be 2x and 1x. And 3 breaks down into 1 and 3. However, I want you to pay attention to that middle value. That middle value is negative, so our numbers need to multiply to be positive and yet add to be negative. So remember, this is that case. The only way that that is possible is if both of those values are negative. It's the only way this is going to work because they have to multiply to be positive yet add to be negative. So now I'm going to start tossing these numbers in, all right? So I'm going to start with the way that it's written, -1 and -3. I'm going to make my connections. 2 and negative 3 make negative 6. That's going to make negative 1. And if you notice, we actually did it right the first time. Okay, negative 1 and negative 6 add to that negative 7 that we were shooting for right up there. So this is truly our factored form, right? So again, basically the same we were doing in the previous notes, just adding in the extra little bit this time. So let's continue with our next one. 3x squared minus 14x plus 8. And again, I'm going to break these both of these numbers down first. And again, we're in luck. That first one, the 3, only has one way to break down. So there's only one way that I can make this skeleton this time. All right. And actually, I should have left this blank because when we look at our signs, we have two numbers multiplying to be positive, but they need to add to negative 14. So what that is telling me, this is another case, actually both numbers need to be negative. It's the only way it's going to work to add to that negative 14x. And now we're going to go and play our game of matching. So negative 1, negative 8, that connects to negative 24. That connects to negative 1. That does not add to the negative 14 we're looking for. So I'm going to try again. I'm going to switch it so my negative 8 is there. My negative 1 is there. That connects to negative 3. That connects as negative 8. Still not the negative 14 that we're shooting for. So we have exhausted the negative 1 and the negative 8 option. We know that that is not it. So let's try negative 2 and negative 4. That's going to connect and give us negative 12. That's going to connect and give us negative 2. And we are in luck. Negative 12 and negative 2 add to the negative 14 we're looking for, meaning that this is going to be our completely factored form. All right, so to continue working, a couple more examples. Now, this time, this 12 is going to get a little bit complicated because notice how many things form both of those 12s. Okay, so we have a lot of different structures that we're going to have to try out. So, when we're considering this one, I'm going to start with that first structure. And let's see if anything plays out. And again, notice they're multiplying to be positive, but adding to be negative. So that's communicating to me that both numbers must be negative. So let's start talking through this. So if we plop in negative 1 and negative 12, that's going to give us negative 12. That's going to give us negative 12. Well, negative 12 and negative 12 gives us negative 24, which is close, but not what we're going for. So I'm going to erase that and try again. I'm going to flip them. I'm going to put negative 12 there, negative 1 there. And you can probably notice right off the bat, negative 12 times 12, that is going to give us way, way too big of a number. All right, so I can already tell you before I even do that calculation, that's going to give me negative 144. I'm not even going to finish that one because that would just end up being way too much. So let's jump to negative 2 and negative 6. Well, there's negative 24, but then that gives us negative 6, which is going to be negative 30. So again, still too much. So let's reverse those. Put -6 there. Oh, I'm sorry. That should be a -2. So that's going to give us -2. -6 times 12. May need a calculator for that one. That's going to give you -72. Again, way too big of numbers. So that's not going to work either. So let's try -3, -4. There's -36. Now, we're already beyond that -25 that we can shoot for. So I'm not even going to finish that one. We're going to get way too big of numbers. And you may notice, even if we did the reverse, that's going to make that -48. Still going to be way too big. So that's telling me is that the 1 and 12 are not what we're shooting for. Let's try a next structure. 2x and 6x. Now, little hint for this. Notice 2 and 6. Both of those are going to give us even numbers. When we multiply, those are both going to create even numbers. So, I want you to consider, is there any way that we can get an odd number out of that scenario when both of those numbers are even? The answer is going to be no, there is not. So a way to shorten this for you is realizing that is always going to produce an even number. I can tell you right off the bat, that is not going to work to give an odd number. Okay? So I'm going to jump straight down to the 3x and the 4x. And so now let's start plugging stuff in, seeing what works. So -1 and -12. That gives me -36, -4. Not what we're going for. And even the reverse of that. If I were to put -12 here, -1, you're getting an even bigger number with -48. We know no matter what, that is not going to give us what we want either. Let's try -6 and -2. So -24, -6, still not what we're looking for. So let's jump down and try this. Let's try -4, -3. So there's a -16, there's a -9, and if you notice, that gives us the combination that we need. That gives us the -25. So as you can tell, this can take quite a bit of searching, quite a bit of time. But if you keep with it and learn the little tricks of the trade, for example, knowing maybe both numbers can't be even if you're looking for odd number, little tricks like that will really help you get through this process. Okay? Now, let's try this one. Again, my first step, I'm going to break it up. 6 and 1, 2 and 3, 1 and 5. And again, notice, because of that -13x, I know that I'm looking for two numbers that are adding to be negative, so I know both of those must be negative. So I'm going to start with that first structure, looking at 6x and x. And I'm going to see if I can make this work. So -1 and -5 give me -30, -1. Well, that's too much. That's -31. So let's try the reverse of that. Let's try the -5 here, -1 there, -6, -5. But that's only -11. That was not working either. So that's telling me that first structure is not going to be the answer that we're looking for. So Let's create our second structure, 2x and 3x. Let's see if we can make this work. So I'm going to plug in -1, -5, make my connections. So that's giving me -10. That's giving me -3. Oh, there we go. There's the -13 that I'm looking for. So this is going to be my answer. All right, so that's what it looks like when C is positive and B is negative. Now, this next section right here, this is taking a look at what happens when C is negative. All right, so when that C value is negative, that's telling us we're looking for a positive number and a negative number. So let's take a look at what that looks like. So this 2, we're going to break down just like we did before. We're going to break down that 5 just like we were before. Now, when I go to make this skeleton, I know it's going to be 2x and x. And now, I know that one of my numbers must be negative. I'm going to save that till after I plug it in, all right? So what I mean by that is I'm going to try 1 and 5, okay? Now, to save a lot of writing, I'm just going to put the 1 and 5 in. So that's going to give me 10. That's going to give me 1. And I want to think to myself, is there any way to get a positive 9 with 10 and 1, knowing one of those is going to be negative? And the answer is yes. If I make that a -1, then 10 and -1 make a positive 9. So to save yourself a lot of writing, that's how I'm going to consider these. I'm going to ignore the sign until I make those connections and then see, is there any way making one of those negative if it'll work? So this means I know it's going to be -1 and +5 that are giving me the combination that I'm looking for, because that is how I'm getting the positive 9. And again, this is going to take a lot of practice in order to get through these. But in the end, all of them are going to be completely doable. And with practice, it'll make a lot more sense. So let's look at this one. I'm going to break this apart. So 6 turns into 1 and 6, 2 and 3. 35 breaks down into 1 and 35, 3, oh, not 3 and 7, 5 and 7. All right, so let's see if we can get this working. So I'm going to choose one of my skeletons to begin with. I'm going to choose 2x and 3x. And let's just start seeing if we can make this work. So I'm going to start plugging in those numbers. Now, again, realizing they need to multiply to be a -35. So I'm going to start just by plugging in the numbers, making my connections, and seeing, is there any way making either the 70 or the 3 negative would this work? Well, making one of them negative would just either be 67 or -67. So neither one of those are going to be what I'm looking for. So let's reverse it. 35 and 1. Well, 35 and 3, that gives us 105. So again, making one of those negative, is that going to work? No, because it's either making 103 or -103. So still not quite what we are going for. So let's try 5 and 7. So that's giving us 14. That's giving us 15. So making one of those negative, can that give us -1? I think it actually can. Because notice, if we choose to make that one negative, -15 plus 14 gives us that -1 that we're looking for. So that is exactly what we needed. So here, that is going to be our final solution for this one. All right, so I think you have seen enough of these. So I'm going to save the rest of these to do in class together as warm-ups. So please make sure you have everything written down and come back with any questions. I realize this is a lot to take in, a lot of new stuff. So if you have any questions, please bring them in and we will discuss more of this in class.